Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends, guys. Welcome back to r/EntitledPeople, where people truly believe that they're the center of the universe and everyone has to bow down to them. And in today's episode, guys, nothing is more entitled than Karens threatening people with knowing the owner to get what they want. And spoiler alert, they don't. The lineup today is gonna leave you shaking your heads because Karens are getting embarrassed. I hope you enjoy the stories. Hit subscribe if you're not subscribed, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. Okay, so I haven't worked retail in quite a while, but this one comes from the time I worked at a small gas station while putting myself through college. At the time, I was a shift lead at the gas station, which basically meant that I got paid 50 cents more an hour to do twice as much work as I had as a cashier. The franchise was run by the owner, his daughter, and her husband, and I knew all of them really well. I almost always worked the Sunday afternoon shifts by myself, and this particular Sunday, I had come in a few hours early as our morning shift decided that working at a gas station was beneath them, so I was called in to take over. This is while I was getting over a cold, but I needed money, so I loaded up on Dayquil and packed as many cough drops as I could fit into my purse, and I hoped for the best. The whole day went surprisingly smoothly. Everything had been kept quiet except for the occasional customer, that is, until a man comes in and he's a frickin' Karen. So the man walks up to me and says, "Hey, something's wrong with your soda machine. The Coke tastes like piss juice." And yes, those were his actual words. I say to him, "Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Go ahead and get any of the others you want for free. I'll go check to see if the bib needs to be replaced. If you want, you can wait up here to see if it's better." The guy then stares intently for a minute and he says, "And?" I say to him, "Oh, was there something else?" The guy then says to me, "Well, I effing hope there is. This is a gas station. The one effing thing you should have is a working effing drink machine. I'm asking, and what else are you gonna do for me?" I tell him, "Sir, I'm not charging you for the drink. Our machine doesn't tell us when the bibs need to be replaced. We have to eyeball it and wait for one to go bad. Like I said, I'm sorry about that, and I'll go check and replace it for you." He then says, "Well, F me, aren't you so nice, letting me drink this garbage for free? I'll have you know, I've been coming here a long time, and I know the owner of this place. So give me your effing name and his number, and we'll call him to see what somebody who knows what customer service actually is can do." Now, at this point, I don't know what got over me. Honestly, I don't. I've never confronted customers because usually I didn't care enough. Maybe it was the exhaustion or the cold medicine or something, but I decided I'd had enough. So I say, "Yeah, no, I'm not gonna do that." And hearing that, the guy's eyes practically bulge out of his head. He says, "What did you say to me?" I say to him, "Look, sir, I don't know what you expect to happen from calling the owner, but I'm sick and I've been working at this place for like 11 hours straight, and I'll be here for another 2 before my relief comes in. I don't want to deal with you, and neither does he. It's 8:30 at night. He's eating dinner with his family, and I'm not gonna bother him with this because frankly, it doesn't matter to him. You could literally never come back, and nobody here would ever care. And I'll have you know that I also know the owner personally, and the worst thing that'll happen is they'll tell me that I shouldn't have given you a free drink because it affects our sales. But if you know him so well, then I suggest you talk to him when you leave and have a chat with him to see what else he can do for you. Have a nice day." Hearing me say that, the man said a few more choice swears, but then he storms off when I decide to ignore him. I still have no idea what came over me, but damn if I'm not still proud of it. I told the owners about this, and they looked over the cameras, and they said they've never seen the man in their life. I thought so. Yeah, why am I not surprised, guys? And I freaking swear, like 99% of people who say they know the owner actually don't. And honestly, people who know the owner well, I'm pretty sure they never use it as a threat to employees because, like OP said, it looks bad. Like, just imagine owning a store and having a friend call you during dinner to complain about your employees not giving them free stuff. Like, what kind of friend is that person, right? And good on OP for standing up for herself. Nothing to feel bad about here. It's just so silly how this happened all over a drink. Like, the guy got it for free already. What else does he want? Some people can be way over the top, right? So my parents have owned our beach property for 30 years. They bought it outright in the 80s and they flipped it into what's now their retirement property. When I was younger, we only stayed there during vacations from school. But about 10 years ago, my mom was tired of the cold and they made the move there permanently. I moved into the other side of the duplex about 2 years ago. The downside of this property is that while my father installed a driveway, it only fits his car and mom's, so usually I park on the street outside. Since we live in a high tourist area and on the beach, as soon as you step off our stairs, you're officially on a public street, so parking is a complete nightmare. This will be relevant in a second. So one morning, I'm coming home, and by sheer luck, I find a spot right outside my door. So I pull my car in, and I'm getting my things together, when out of nowhere, a man, who I'll refer to as Kevin, begins knocking on my window, like hard tapping. The guy screams at me and says, "Excuse me? What do you think you're doing?" I reply, "I'm parking my car." The guy then screams and says, "You can't park here." To which I respond, "I'm pretty sure I can. It's public parking." The guy then says, "No, I live here. I own this house. I usually park here and your car is blocking the stairs to my house." Hearing that, I entertain him, and I say, "I'm sorry, you live here? I had no idea. How long have you lived here?" The guy replies, "Why does it matter? It's my house, and I'm telling you, you can't park here." Now, at this point, I'm trying not to laugh in his face as I get out of my car and start walking up my front steps. That's when Karen begins screaming at me to get off his property or he's gonna call the police. My dad, hearing the commotion, comes outside and he asked what the problem is. And here's the thing about my dad. I'm the only daughter to a 6'1", 225-pound muscular Italian man. Like, my dad competes in powerlifting competitions. My dad's a very nice man, but he's also nobody to mess with. And here's another thing about my dad. He has little to no patience for anyone even looking at me funny. I didn't want to turn this into a bigger thing than it already was, so I just casually informed my dad that I wasn't aware that we had a new person living with us, and it would have been nice to be informed. My dad just stands there confused, asking me who lives with us now. That's when Kevin apologizes and he starts slinking back to his car, and I'm about to pee myself laughing. I told my dad what happened, and he asked me why I didn't let him handle it. I just shrugged. We had a good laugh about this, and weeks later, we still bring it up when we need a pick-me-up. The only sad part is, with my parents owning a beach property, I have 1,000,001 more stories just like this, because apparently, the world's full of Karens and Kevins. Oh yeah, like I can only imagine the amount of entitled people who pretend it's their house to score a parking spot during peak hours. Like, I've been to crowded beaches before, and it's such a pain to find parking spots, guys, especially since OP says they live in a high tourist area. With that said though, I only wish OP let her dad go off on the guy to really intimidate him, because that guy was such a bully, right? He totally thought OP was a random person looking for a parking spot by the beach and could intimidate her to take that parking spot. Like, some people are such sleazy a-holes, right? And guys, while we're on the topic of entitled people taking parking spots, listen to this next one. So I currently work at a school as a teacher. Our school has 2 yards, one in the middle of the buildings and one in the front. The one in the front has some grass and benches, and the oldest class can use it as their schoolyard during breaks, while the younger ones stay on the inside yard. The outside yard is next to the driveway of the school, where firefighters or ambulances drive through to get to the entrance. One teacher is always present in each yard during breaks, in case somebody gets hurt or something. On this day, the teacher present in the outside yard was me. Also, a necessary side note. I live in a country where public school buildings and the property they're on are funded and owned by the country. There is no public school on private property. With that said, the break had almost ended when a really fancy, expensive Mercedes pulls up and parks right in the driveway, despite 5 signs telling you that it's forbidden to park there. So of course, I go to inform the driver that he can't even have his car there while he's sitting in it. He needs to move it as soon as possible. That's when the driver gets out of the car. The guy's in his mid-30s probably, wearing an expensive suit, and he looks really annoyed. I explain everything, and he just laughs at me saying, "What do you know? You're a schoolgirl. I know the owner of this property, and he said I could park here." Now, I do look young, but I'm in my 30s, but here's the conversation. I say to the guy, I'm sorry, but I'm not a schoolgirl, I'm a teacher here, and I can't imagine you know the owner to this public school as it doesn't have one. You're not allowed to park here. It's against the law. At that, the driver says, are you stupid? I know the headmaster. I'm allowed to park here. Now, what this entitled idiot didn't know is that the headmaster's office is on the ground floor, facing the yard, and he likes to work with his windows open. So I yell over to the window, hey, Mr. Headmaster. The headmaster looks out the window and says, yes. I then say, did you allow this guy to park here? He says he knows you and you allowed him to park here. This is when the school bell rings and the kids go back to their classes. I don't have a class after break, so I'm relaxed. The headmaster ends up coming outside to join us. He says, what? That's insane. It's strictly forbidden to park here. Also, I've never seen you before. The driver responds, okay, that's it. You're not the headmaster here. I'll phone the real headmaster and he'll tell you. While he does that, we stand by, looking amused. We then hear sirens in the background, coming closer and closer. At that point, we didn't know, obviously, but I'll tell you now so you understand everything. So upon entering the chemistry room, a kid ran into his teacher carrying some acids. The acids fell to the floor and soaked both the students and the teacher's shoes, so they called an ambulance for chemical burns. This kind of emergency where I live enables the ambulance drivers to just mow through anything in their way to get to the patients, no concerns for the damage. So this is when the ambulance arrives. The driver sticks his head out the window and he screams, move that car, it's in the way. The driver doesn't move, so his car gets rammed by the ambulance. That's when the cops get involved. My headmaster calmly calls the police and explains what happened, and the driver was speechless the entire time. The driver needed to pay for the damages on the ambulance. As for the damages on his car, he had to cover it out of pocket as he was parked in a zone he wasn't supposed to be in. The student and teacher are okay. They both have some scars on their feet, but they very well could have lost their feet if the ambulance had argued with the driver. Yeah, can't say that guy didn't deserve what happened to his car. Like, if there are signs everywhere saying you shouldn't park there, like, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter how expensive or nice or whatever you may think your car is, you do not park there. That's instant karma right there. And guys, I love how he's on the hook for his damages and the ambulance's damages. Hopefully after that, the guy did learn his lesson. And for all who are curious about ambulances and fire trucks being able to ram cars, this person comments, ram, no. But if there's a fire and someone's deliberately blocking my rig, we will push them out of the way. I'm willing to get written up if that means potentially saving lives. I'll get chewed out, and I've been chewed out before. My parents own a nice piece of property in the suburbs. There's a 1/4-acre pond on the property, and to be honest, it's beautiful. Mainly because my parents are amazing gardeners and they keep everything looking great. It also sits down a small hill, a little ways away from the house. Throughout the years, we've had to chase people fishing and kids playing away. 1, because it's a liability, and 2, there's a ton of huge snapping turtles. We have no trespassing and snapper warning signs, but I guess reading signs is for losers. Anyways, one night, I was in high school, and I look out, and I see a man standing on the other side of the pond, fishing. The guy was about 3 feet past the no trespassing sign. So I tell my dad, and he walked out there to tell the guy to leave. And I, being a nosy teenager, followed, and I'm glad I did because I got to witness the exchange. My dad, standing up the hill from the pond, calls out, "Excuse me, I need to ask you to leave." The guy turns, and seeing my short father, he snorts and says, "Yeah, no." My dad then tells him, "You're on private property, you need to leave." The guy then says, "It's not private property." At that, my dad gestures to the signs. The guy then changes his tune and he says, "Yeah, right, the owner said I could fish here." Now, my dad isn't physically intimidating, but when he's pissed, he gets a scary deep voice. Usually, these exchanges are short and the people are very apologetic, but this dude clearly wanted to stay and he didn't care what my dad said. My dad tells him, "I definitely didn't tell you that, so get the F off my property." The guy then responds, "Well, I thought anyone could fish here." It's at this point, enter a huge ass effing snapping turtle. It was making its way out of the water with the fisherman's line in its mouth. The snapping turtle, who is now hooked after attempting to eat the worm, was pissed. Neither my dad nor the guy noticed as they were still arguing. My dad's just screaming, "Just leave my effing yard," and the idiot's telling my dad to F off. The guy's facing us, away from the water, but he's still holding the rod that the snapping turtle's using to floss his teeth. Finally, he gives up on being able to fish and he jerks the rod to leave. It didn't move much, but it pissed the turtle off even harder. That's when the guy turns to see what it was caught on, and instead of a rock, he sees a prehistoric animal with teeth meandering its way towards him. And the turtle was pissed. My dad finally saw the snapping turtle, and he used this moment to yell, "And this is why you can't fish here, dumbass." Well, the guy apparently didn't want to lose the rod, and he was trying to pull it towards him, as if it was a fish he could catch and release, not a mini demon dinosaur. That got the turtle more pissed off, and he lunged, biting the dude's leg. And there was blood everywhere. We had to call an ambulance. The guy ends up getting some sort of infection, and he died a month later. We made a pen for the turtle, and now he has a little family. I'm just kidding. The dude just drops the rod, and he scrambles up the hill to his car while my dad laughed. My dad then went down, cut the line, and he ushered the turtle into a trap to be rehomed, where dogs, kids, and dumbasses won't accidentally run into him. The entitlement still baffles me to this day. Like, if the guy apologized and he was kind, my dad would have geeked out about fishing rods with him. Instead, he lost an apparently nice fishing rod. Don't fish where there are signs telling you not to fish. Yeah, you'd think that's common sense, but like OP mentioned, entitled people don't like to read signs, and that's what the guy gets. Consider losing that nice, expensive fishing rod, the a-hole tax, for arguing with the property owner about fishing on their land. So I've been lurking for quite some time, and I decided it was finally time to start sharing my stories. Here's some background. I grew up in the pet store business. My dad moved us around a lot, buying stores that were failing and then turning them around to resell, flipping them essentially. The last one we stayed in for so many years that I have tons of stories. This is one of my favorites. Now, the most common thing with people working in retail is not having the ability to tell customers exactly what you think. This is what made working for my dad a great time. My dad gave 0 Fs what anyone thought of him, or what he had to say. When customers threatened to never come back, he would clear their items from the counter and he would show them the door. My dad was brutal and truthfully a bit on the crazy side. One of the big problems in the pet store business is much of your inventory is alive, and people, especially children, love teasing and poking the animals. This is not only harmful to the animals, but it creates a liability risk. Anyone in the pet store industry will tell you that no amount of danger do not touch signs will stand up against a lawsuit. Which brings us to our wonderful customer, Karen. We'll call her Liar Liar. And on this day, she came in with her obnoxious young child. So late afternoon, Karen and her son come into our store to browse, likely to kill time. From the time they enter, Karen has 0 idea where her child is and what he's doing. The kid's out of control. He's knocking things off shelves, he's running, just being a little a-hole. Meanwhile, Karen's oblivious and she's browsing. Our store was decent sized for an independent pet store, and we had the best fish room ever. So Karen's off in the fish room while the kid makes his way to the exotic bird section. There were many very sweet and very expensive birds there, and we were quite protective of them. The kid's being very loud. He's yelling at the birds, and that's when I come by and I catch him poking at a very sweet Amazon parrot. The bird was sweet and talked like crazy, and this was the only time I heard her scream. So I took a play straight from Dad's playbook and I asked the kid where his parents were. He said he didn't know. So I led him to the front counter and I instructed him to stay there with an employee while I locate his mom. When I found his mother, I explained to her what happened and that he was no longer allowed to roam the store unattended, as he was a danger to himself and our animals. Upon hearing that, she storms to the front. She grabs her child and she leaves in a huff. I should also mention here that the conversation with Karen took place in the fish room, directly on the other side of Dad's office, and the tops are open, not full walls. A couple of hours later, Karen calls and she asks to speak to the owner. The call gets transferred to Dad and happens as follows. Karen says, "So I was in your store with my son, and your employee was very rude to the both of us. He said terrible things about my son. He then swore at him and me, and he grabbed my son by the arm, and he threw us out of the store. I want him fired. I was prepared to spend thousands at your store." My dad tells her, "I'm very sorry to hear that. Please give me some time to get to the bottom of it and give me a call back tomorrow." Now, what Karen didn't know was that Dad witnessed the kid's behavior. He then saw me escort him to the counter and then went to his office where he heard our entire interaction. The next day, Karen calls back for my dad. Karen says, "So I called yesterday, and I want to know if that employee has been fired. I will call the Better Business Bureau, blah, blah, blah." That's when my dad says, "I was going to deal with this while on the phone with you yesterday, but I thought a day for you to come to your senses may have helped you. I see it didn't. I saw your child destroying my store and my property. I saw him terrorizing my animals. I also saw the employee, my son, lead him to the counter and speak with him respectfully. I saw you ignoring your child while he destroyed my property. And further, I heard the entire exchange between you and my employee, who happens to be my son, and yourself. So I thought about firing him, but that's when I realized that you and your child are both a-holes, and I would prefer you never enter my store again. Thank you for the customer feedback. F off." Click. The woman never came back, and we never heard anything else from her again. Yeah, that would be the wise decision on Karen's part, never showing her face there again. And seriously, shame on her for lying to try to get OP fired. That woman's in her own little world, guys. Like, how dare she try to get an employee fired for reprimanding her son when she's letting him destroy a store? I just love that OP's dad told her what she needed to hear and more. And I love that little Miss Liar didn't get what she wanted. So this is my grandfather's story from around the 1970s. My granddad had grown up in a very working-class farming family, but as a teenager, he started working as a printing apprentice at a local factory. Over the decades, he scrimped and saved to buy shares in the business, along with his future business partner. Eventually, he was 50% shareholder, making him one of 2 CEOs, but he was the more involved partner day to day. Now, these words aren't exact because I haven't heard this story since I was a little girl, around 15 years ago. But I do remember the spirit of the story and bits, enough to cobble it together. Because of his background, he was a very hands-on boss, and this is where our story begins. So it was morning, before the workers arrived, where he was sweeping the hallway. As I said, very hands-on, when a man in a pinstripe suit walks in. We'll call him Entitled Jerk, and my grandfather, Mr. Grandfather. The entitled jerk sees my grandfather and he shouts, "You, I have a very important meeting with the owner, Mr. Grandfather. So you need to put that broom down and take me to his office." My grandfather, feigning ignorance, says, "Oh, really? Well, I think Mr. Grandfather is a bit busy right now," motioning to the broom. I should also note that my granddad has a wicked sense of humor. He was incredibly talented at winding people up, especially people who were rude to him. That's when the entitled jerk says, "He won't be too busy to see me. We have a very important contract. And also, I'll be speaking with him about your attitude. If you work here, you should treat his clients with respect." That's when my grandfather says, "All right then, let's go together. I'm sure he'll understand my side." So my granddad takes the entitled dude to Mr. Grandfather's office and knocked on the door. My grandfather then enters, sits down, removed his cap, and then proceeds to say, "Good morning, I'm Mr. Grandfather." The rest of the conversation was essentially my granddad dressing the man down sternly, and eventually canceling not just the contract, but all future business with the company. My grandfather didn't tolerate rudeness, and due to his upbringing, he was especially touchy about people who believed they were better than others, thus talking down to them. The man left, red and flustered. He got into his dirty blue van and he drove off quickly. My granddad never saw him again, but I still remember him with tears of laughter in his eyes, telling the story to a 6 or 7-year-old me and my sister around the kitchen table. See, this is why you should never pull the "do you know who I am" crap, because you never know what someone else has or doesn't have. And losing that big contract and all future business with Granddad's company, I hope that dude was humbled in the end. And that, my friends, is r/EntitledPeople. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the stories today. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/EntitledPeople episode, another one, where a smug Karen attacks the owner with hot coffee and she ruins her life. It's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.